Mercedes may have just found a solution to the issues they faced since the beginning of the year. The team has made a fresh start following a poor performance at the beginning of the 2023 season. Now that the second race of the season is coming up, it looks like the team is ready to dominate the track. But how far is their new strategy going to take them? And what are the expectations of the drivers? Stay till the end for the details. The team opted for a more basic design because of the problems experienced in the last season. The previous aggressive approach to design caused a lot of bouncing as the race car was driven. So the decision was for the design to be stripped down to address the bouncing problem. But it seemed they may have overdone the simplification because the general throughput dropped drastically. And all for the sake of eliminating or at least reducing the bounce. For one, they took out the side pods completely. And they have included an improved suspension in the front and rear tires. But the major changes came with the overall design approach that ultimately gave us the W14. Last time out, Lewis Hamilton had proposed what he expected from the design team if they ever tweaked the car, but it seems they didn't listen, and Hamilton has openly voiced his disappointment at this. For one, this has already cost the Mercedes team the Bahrain race at the start of the year. They didn't do too well in Jeddah either, and Aston Martin's Alonso beat both Mercedes drivers to a top 3 finish. The specifics of the upgrade, or lack thereof, revolve around what is referred to as a zero pod. As mooted earlier, it's about the removal of the side pods. In fact, the whole redesign is based on this one singular aspect. Whether or not Mercedes included the side pods meant they had to change the entire chassis of the car based on this decision, so no side pods suggest that everything from aerodynamic bodywork to the rear tire suspension had to be readjusted. But fans seem to be kicking against this design and urging the team to include these side pods. But you can't entirely blame the absence of side pods for the woeful performance of Mercedes so far. Side pods are just one component in the car and not necessarily the game changers they are believed to be. During testing, the Mercedes cars driven by Hamilton and Russell seemed to be sandbagging in the eyes of observers. It turned out the problem goes deeper than that. The woes came into better focus at the Bahrain race and even the Jeddah race, leaving Mercedes at 3rd place on the leaderboard. Their drivers, Hamilton and Russell, came 5th and 6th, respectively. And these positions say a lot. Then there's that argument on whether Hamilton is the most seasoned driver in the field. It probably just goes to show that a great driver can't save a bad car. Undoubtedly, the Mercedes team sees all that is happening in front of them and is taking steps to correct the situation. First off, the W14 race car is all they've got for the foreseeable future. They could switch cars mid-season, and the rules allow for that. Essentially, we're talking about introducing the W15 earlier than planned. That car is supposed to be the 2024 season car for Mercedes, but they might be compelled to bring it in. Such a car would already be in development ahead of schedule, and it's how Formula One teams work. Whatever the case, they could use the lesson learned from the W14 and put all that energy into manufacturing the W15. And if we're lucky, we might get to see it race by the middle of the year. But there are certain strict rules Toto Wolff and his team have to adhere to. The Formula One Association has placed an annual cap on spending and limited wind tunnel times for any given year. So the Mercedes team has to consider this when introducing a new car mid-season. This is because by that time, half of the yearly allowance would have been spent on the W14, and the W15, which is supposed to be a new car needing full treatment, would be left with only half of what it requires to develop fully. The car swap is just one solution being considered. Formula One enthusiasts have also suggested that Mercedes could go the way of Aston Martin. The Aston Martin team simply copied Red Bull's design, and the results are beginning to show. A wise man once said, if you want to be successful, copy someone who already is. So Aston Martin's design and bodywork borrow heavily from the Red Bull racing car. In the past, Mercedes has been known to conceptualize their own designs for the sake of racing pedigree. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with copying the race car design of a competitor because no F1 rules prohibit the move. Yet it is unlikely that Mercedes will go down that route. Moreover, it's probably too late now to copy Red Bull because the season is underway. So the incentive to copy is not there, not even with the W15, which is presently under development. So what other solutions are available to save the Mercedes racing season? So we're invariably back to square one, and the issue of the side pods We've already mentioned that these side pods are barely a significant part of the whole design only as far as wind management goes. They don't necessarily add or take anything away from the overall performance, but we may be wrong, and the Mercedes engineers might know better. Is there something they are not telling us? Let's step back a little and try to analyze their states of mind. Last year's W13 race car experienced a lot of bouncing, which may occur when the middle of the car is not properly supported. Essentially, the middle is soft, like a jungle bridge. So, if we were thinking like the engineers at Mercedes, we might want to boost that part of the chassis. So, in this case, make it less heavy. Are we up to something here? That probably explains the engineering decision to take out the side pods for what it's worth. If you saw the races from last year, the Mercedes race car scrapped the road a lot, as evidenced by the flying sparks. That was scary to watch. Thankfully, nothing serious happened. But all of that is just our layman's analysis. We're absolutely sure it's a lot more technical than that. Hamilton came out to say his observations about the W13 race car came down to drag. During the brainstorming meeting, overall weight was also considered. The new weight rules stipulate that the car must weigh 296 kilograms or less. This is 2 kilograms less than the allowed weight for the previous season. It was ultimately decided that weight wasn't the problem in the short term. Hamilton also pointed out the challenge of brake separation, or more simply a split in the brakes for both front tires. It happens when the temperature of the brakes for both tires varies and one becomes hotter than the other. It can pose a challenge to inexperienced drivers, so Hamilton wanted it addressed. It's the reason we have engineers to fix classical design problems like that. There was also the tire warm-up issue, which was to be addressed with a better balanced car overall. Finally, Mercedes admitted to being limited in what they could do with their engine according to the rules. Mercedes prides itself on building great engines without the need for software enhancements. However, in the case of the W14, they will incorporate some programmable tweaks to improve performance. It's a move they had to make to remain competitive, and given that they've mastered the art of engine manufacture, they certainly know how to optimize engines for the best results. What's even more frustrating is that Red Bull isn't the only car Aston Martin borrowed from. Mercedes is in fact the manufacturer of the Aston Martin race engine. Mercedes also extends this same service to McLaren amongst other teams, but you don't see those other teams beating Mercedes. It would seem that Aston Martin is hungrier for a pole position than Mercedes, who have carried over their woes from the 2022 season into 2023. The next race on the F1 calendar comes up on the 2nd of April in Melbourne, Australia. That is roughly 2 weeks away. What can the Mercedes team do before then to increase their chances of winning? What about letting a few heads roll? The last time we checked, this was not an option for Toto Wolff and his principals. The only option left is for the drivers and the pit crew to hang in there as they painfully watch their chances at victory slowly erode as the 2023 season continues.